Hi, guys. Welcome to Behind the Point. I am here with Pastor Jeff.
Hello.
Hey, guys. We're glad you're here. I am Josue. I think everybody knows that. But on the off chance you don't, that's me. My name is Josue. And let me be the first to apologize. I'm sorry we're getting this one out so late this week. It has been just a very hectic and busy week. So thanks so much for your grace. Thanks for your patience. I'm excited to jump into this episode, but let's start off with a quick icebreaker here. We talked this week about how to get more yeses from the Lord, which is a great question. But what are some of the best yeses you have personally received from the Lord?
The best yes is working here. God, I prayed that I would get a job at the church.
Okay.
That was a good yes. My praying for both my kids, but especially we prayed for a couple years for Sam before we got our firstborn. Just was a little bit hard. It was just hard for Carrie to get pregnant, and so we prayed a lot for him, and then God gave us a son, and even for marriage with Carrie too.
Yeah.
We started dating in high school, kind of like you and Stephanie. And I really I loved Carrie since since I was in high school, but I prayed for a while, just God, if she's not the woman for me, then just please help me to know that now, just so I know it was going to get harder over time. Like if we were going to end up not being together, that it would be harder in time. So I prayed a bit just about I want to marry her. And so please, if she's going to be my wife, then help it to be clear.
Right.
So those are probably the most significant ones in my life, but God's been very good to me.
Awesome.
What about you? What are some of the big yeses?
I think it's interesting. I don't necessarily gauge them off of the yeses, but off of the no's.
Okay.
So I have the yeses because God said no to these things. So I think the most obvious or prominent example in my life would be I probably would have joined the military had the Lord said no to that. And so I was on track for it, headed to boot camp and everything. And the Lord said no to that. So as a result of that is why I am where I am today. I can't imagine where I would be. I have to believe I probably would be dead. Because when I would have enlisted, everything was going on in Iraq, and odds are I'd have been deployed, and who knows, I may have been dead. I don't know. So the biggest yeses for me are based off of what God said no to, which to me is an encouragement that some of the no's from God are because he wants to say yes to something else. And so, that's how I would answer that. I think a lot of that is, I don't know that Stephanie and I would be married to the exact same point with you.
Sure.
Certainly wouldn't have my kids, wouldn't be in the position I am today. I don't even know that I'd live in California. I may not even be alive. So all the yeses,
some of the things you thought you wanted
that I wanted. But because God said no to that, he said yes to everything else after that. So that's kind of how
good.
Yeah. Anyhow, just encouragement if people ever receive those no's, right? Those can be kind of discouraging.
A bummer at the time.
And only in hindsight will you see that, unless you have the very two clear paths before you, which is an option, I think, sometimes. But yeah, it's not always a discouraging no, just to be fair. So. Anyways,
oftentimes God has a better plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, but I got something better.
That's right. Yeah. All right, so let's jump into your sermon. So we are a couple weeks out from finishing the Sermon on the Mount. I'm really excited, actually, to wrap this one up. I think it's going to be a good
It's
series,
been a great, from my perspective, we're biased.
I've
enjoyed this series.
I've enjoyed,
this was your first time preaching through. You said preaching just
never
straight
preached
through the
through
Sermon
it.
on the Mount.
And the challenge, of course, is that it is a sermon in and of itself. So
Wait,
the
how
audacity,
much more can we expand on?
the audacity
Jesus said it perfectly.
To be like, well, let me explain to you what Jesus meant. Let me clarify what I would have changed. But it was a challenge, but I've really enjoyed it. I have really enjoyed it, and it's been good. So I loved the way you worded the way you titled this sermon. Yes, please. Right. The idea is we want more yeses from God. And the question was, how do we get more yeses? And I loved your point. So let's jump right into them. Your first point was to actively engage him. You base this off of Matthew 7:7-8. Ask and it'll be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. That for whoever asks receives, right? And so you mentioned that Jesus encourages us to keep asking. You also shared that you asked God over 1,000 times or close to 1,000 times
Yes.
for a job at CBU before you got hired, and that ultimately he answered your
Yep.
prayer.
It
You
wore
were
him down.
hired. Yeah, you wore him down, but
Yeah.
you were hired there at CBU.
Yes.
You mentioned that part of that process, part of requesting so many times, that there was something unhealthy
Sure.
about that. So
Yep.
help us understand, what is unhealthy about repeated asking?
Yeah.
What's unhealthy about that?
So there's a balance. My whole point of that topic was it's okay to keep asking, and that was part of why I shared the story. But there was some unhealth in it. The problem was I was so desperate, I guess, for that answer, for a yes, to change my current circumstances. That at times I just wasn't really living in the moment. I wasn't living for today. I was more focused on, if I get this thing, then it will make me happy. And instead of a mindset of, what's the best thing? Like, what does God want for me to do this day? And it wasn't totally that, but I just realized an obsession with this. I had to have the yes in order to be happy in life. And so I actually had one of my good friends, another believer. He encouraged me part of that time, because along with the asking, was also applying. And I was just job searching every day. And it wasn't just CBU. I was looking at other places. I just happened to be coming back to that. But he encouraged me. He's like, why don't you fast from applying?
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
And just kind of wait on the Lord a little bit.
Yeah.
And that was really helpful. I don't know that I fasted much on praying for CBU. That might have been good to kind of include in that fast, in a sense of, instead of just asking for that, to maybe spend some of that prayer on some other things as well. But I think it was just the, I guess, tying it like I needed the yes so much, instead of, as I talk about later, and I think we'll get to it in some of the questions, is letting my prayers evolve to focus on some other things. Because I think it ended up working in my favor. Obviously, I ended up getting a job there. But I think it's, what if I gave some of that attention? Maybe if I spread some of that out, I could have backed off a little bit on the prayer. Still prayed it occasionally, but what if I spent more of that time praying for some other people, more for some of clarity in what God had for me that day, that type of thing? Might have been more fruitful.
I guess all the follow-up questions here are related to that. Why did you not receive I don't mean this to sound as harsh as it does, but why did you not receive the countless rejections as a no? So, and I asked that because I asked a friend of mine several years ago, why is it like, why do you keep asking?
Because I'm a dumb host. Wait, no,
well,
I'm just kidding.
Well, no,
No, I'm just
I asked one time, and I was kind of, I'm still wrestling with the answer that he gave me, but it was, and I said, how do you know that, that God hasn't said no yet? And his response to me was, because it's not a favorable answer. And I thought, I'm not sure that I agree with that, and I'm not sure I disagree with it. But it's my question. There's kind of a multi-layered follow-up question: is why not receive that as a no? And is it okay to keep asking God if He has clearly, over 1,000 times almost, said no? Is it okay to keep asking Him? And I guess, how do you recognize a no? How do you know when God has said no?
Well, I guess for some of that, it was to a specific position was no. So when that door closed, I mean, I would get an email or a letter letting me know that position was filled. So some of that was like, well, clearly God didn't want me to be in that. I think I didn't feel bad asking, because for me, I thought it could also be a wait. I just didn't know for sure. You didn't have
that solid God saying no.
Yes, there's obvious I didn't get those positions, but there were a lot of different positions on campus, and another one opening up in the future. So to me, I thought it could be just not right now. So like more of a no and a wait.
I want to make sure I'm understanding that correctly. Because of the abundance of other positions that were available, you interpreted God closing one door, saying no to this one position, as a no there, but not no entirely to
Correct.
this campus.
Yeah.
It could just be another
Yeah.
position.
I
Okay.
didn't feel like a clear. I know some people have had experiences. They really felt like God put on their heart, um, no to something and almost a need to stop asking. I didn't see. I,
So I guess, have you been there then? What was the distinction? Have you ever heard God very clearly say no? And how was that different from
hmm.
this?
I'd almost have to think of. I don't know if I could think of a situation
Okay.
right off the top of my head. I do feel
The,
like there's things that's been more clear. I would say to healing for certain things,
Hmm.
but sometimes it's been very obvious. Someone passing away, and um, or a house, like a specific house. We prayed to like be in a specific home, and that didn't work out. Or
Hmm.
so I feel like some doors there's a more clear closing of it, where for whatever reason, and maybe maybe it was just my ignorance at the time. I just kept, but it worked, and
Yeah.
I mean the persistence was. So part of it was maybe an ignorance, part of it was maybe a faith that something would open up. I just really felt like I guess with the Cal Baptist thing, I really just felt this impression of there was something there that stood out to me so much more than other places.
Okay.
Because I was applying different places. I was really trying to be open, feeling that I really didn't believe that the I was working at at a hotel at the time. I really didn't see that being a long-term calling for me, and for various reasons. And so I really felt like, okay, I was trying to be open and explore different things. Is God calling me to nonprofit? I didn't really think full-time ministry at the time
Hmm.
unless my church, I was serving at a church, and I thought if that opens up to something, maybe. But the church was pretty small, so I thought it would
Yeah.
have to grow a lot to make that
Sure.
happen. But I was looking at like a bunch of different industries and options, but Cal Baptist continued to come on the radar. And as I had those interviews, I had more of a desire to be there. So it's just something like every time, just a draw to the place, a draw to the environment. And so I felt like there was kind of an encouragement and a hope that kept coming up along the way that maybe helped to sustain a possible yes in the future,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so you also mentioned, thank you. That's a helpful distinction
Sure.
because
It's hard. I mean,
yeah, I think at least in my experience, the no that I gave just with my opener there,
mhm.
right? That is, to me, that was a very clear no because everything in my life was geared to joining the military.
Mm,
Everything. And it all came crashing down so fast and so decisively
okay.
that to me it was very clearly a no.
Can I ask, how did you get that no? Like, how did
I
you hear that no from the
I
Lord?
just didn't get it.
You applied and
I
didn't
was
get
supposed to go,
enrolled.
and it's
Okay.
like based off of the expectations and things that were needed of me because like I was ready to go with boot camp and everything. I'd shipped off and everything, and while I was there, it's like the
So you
Lord
went
just
to boot camp
oh yeah, the
and you
Lord
went through the
just
whole thing, but didn't
not
have
the
a.
I didn't go through the whole I didn't make it through the
Okay.
whole boot camp. That's
Okay.
where it was to me. It was such a it was something to do like I had an issue with my knees that
Okay.
as a kid and it flared up through a
Oh,
boot camp and they told me like this it's not going to work for you.
okay.
Like it was a medical deal that like my knees just acted up. They did something they like locked up on me
Yeah.
basically and that was heartbreaking but it came to such a screeching halt so fast there was
Hmm.
nothing else to it and it was crazy because while I was there was when I spent the most amount of time in my Bible and I felt the clearest connection with God
Interesting.
in reading through this little
Yep.
Gideon Bible that they give you there. And
Mm.
I was just like, oh my God, I still have that little Bible. I was like just thinking, oh my gosh. I'm like, I have so many
Yep.
questions and so many
Yeah.
things. And I feel like the Lord was saying, like, stop trying to
Yeah.
run. Stop trying to run. Like you will come back.
Yes.
And so it to me, it very much felt
Yeah.
like a no. But
That's a good point. I guess some no's have come. I mean, a lot of people with injuries.
Mhm.
That's like I thought I was going to be an athlete or do something with this. A closure, losing a job,
Mhm.
a move.
Yeah.
Some of those things are a little
Yeah.
bit more clear.
Yeah.
I think it's because the application. I really wanted to work at the university. I didn't necessarily have in mind I had to have a specific position.
Mm.
And so I think for me, like for that season of pursuing that, I just felt like, okay, maybe it's not that nuanced thing. Maybe it's something else
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Eventually I found it.
There you go. Well, you also mentioned, this brings us to our next question here, that so for me it was God open this door for me, right?
Hmm.
This is what I want. But you gave us the challenge. Our prayer shouldn't be God give us today everything we want,
Hmm.
but rather our prayer should be give us today our daily bread, that our needs, not extravagances that will distract us from God. So what is an extravagance that we can often pray for, that we often do pray for, that can be or will be a distraction
Yeah.
for us?
I mean, probably a lot of material things. Maybe like I want a big house, or
Mm,
I want this career, or more money. But maybe we really wouldn't be faithful with it. Maybe that would lead to something. Maybe there's relationships that would form that would be unhealthy, that
mhm,
would lead us further from Christ. Maybe it would be something that takes away so much of our schedule or our mind that now, again, we're kind of, it's leading us away from Christ.
mhm,
So that might look a little bit different with from person to person.
okay.
What would be extravagant for them? Some people can faithfully steward money and are very generous and continue to keep a humble heart and continue to have a servant mindset, and have the capacity to, even with a busy schedule, stay plugged into the church and served and be effective. Other people, though, can't handle it and just get sucked away by like following off after certain things.
Mhm, yeah.
And so I that's, I guess, why um, God probably says no to a lot of things to
Mhm,
protect us as well.
mhm,
Knowing, I brought up that verse that you had the week before. I
right.
think it was chapter 7, verse 6, about the
Mhm,
don't give pearls to pigs,
pearls,
don't give
right.
what's sacred to dogs, because if you do, they'll trample it underfoot.
Mhm.
And
We may very well not know what to do if God were to give us
yes,
that
yeah,
extravagance. Yeah,
we think it would be a good thing, like, oh, wouldn't it be good for my family to
yeah,
prosper, and I would start giving to the church,
yeah,
and this would open it up for me to serve more, and I'd
right,
have a
right,
bigger platform to influence more people.
right.
But God may know that
Well,
those things would actually possibly become idols to us or lead us
you
astray.
think of the detriment of those who have, the people that spend money on lottery tickets and things,
Hmm.
those who have won the lottery, oftentimes that's their biggest regret,
Yep.
because they're like, they,
Yeah,
number one,
you
they just
think,
don't know how to handle it.
right?
They think they do, and it causes more damage and
Yeah,
destruction than
yeah.
anything
I'm going to
else.
help people. I'm going to
Yeah,
buy a house for my family member. I'm going to pay
yeah,
off debt and do
yeah.
these things, and then they just run
That's a good
themselves
point.
further into the ground.
Yeah, interesting. Well, and one of the things, so I've heard it said, I love the way Cliff Connectily, he's this apologist, he talks about it, that God answers in one of four ways. He says, yes, no, he says, go, no, slow,
Hmm.
or grow. Actually, I think I said those all out of order.
Okay.
He says, no, slow, grow, and go. That's what it
Okay.
is.
So grow is kind of
Grow
the
is,
added one.
so no, yes. So no is obviously no.
No is no.
Slow down is it's
Yeah.
not time yet.
Yeah.
Grow is it I need you to develop
Yeah.
more. And then go is yes, right?
Yeah.
So in this case,
I would probably almost put the grow could be in that waiting period of
it could be,
God's
yeah.
doing some work,
Yes.
waiting as you develop.
Yes.
Then
They can be too,
Yeah.
one speaks to slow down, it's too fast, like
Mhm.
you're not prepared for that. Another, like slow, I think, speaks to external, grow
Mhm.
speaks to the internal, a little
Mhm.
bit with that. But one of the things you challenged also is that Jesus, when people would ask him questions, he wouldn't immediately answer those questions, because he was trying to get them to think deeper.
Yeah.
It's almost his way of saying, slow down,
Yes.
consider this for just a moment, or maybe you need to grow a little bit more, right? So how do we know if Jesus is asking us to think deeper?
I think we had to have our kind of ears open, our eyes open to the environment around us. Are there, is he wanting to communicate something through the word, through the church, through
Mhm.
another person, through our circumstances? And just an openness to, is God communicating something else? Especially, and that was probably for me. And I think maybe that example I gave through my friend saying, you should
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah.
Like, okay, there was my answer,
Mm.
because I was so hyper focused on the yes, or just changing my circumstances. So when
Mhm.
my friend saying that caused me to slow down, and then in that reflection time, I did have some time to, oh, I need to thank God for the day I have. I need to still be intentional about the impact that I have at my work. And I think I shared that in a sermon sometime back too, just being at the hotel and wanting
Yeah.
so desperately to leave. But I did have a positive impact on people there.
Yeah.
I wish I was more effective, and um, if I was maybe open more to other voices in my life that were pointing me to the work that God was doing in that season,
Mm,
the place that He positioned me, then perhaps I would have been even more effective than I
yeah.
was.
Yeah.
So, did that
Well,
answer that?
yes, yeah, I think so. And one of the stories you shared I thought was really neat was with Lauren, our guitarist,
Oh yeah.
who leads the prayer and healing room, and he asked a really powerful question: do our prayers evolve
Hmm.
as we hear from God? I think this conversation is proof of that. That
Sure.
yes, our prayers do evolve because to a certain extent, the way I pray has been affected by the way I've heard God say no,
Yes,
by the way
that's
I've
right.
heard him say yes. And to your point, you've done the exact same thing,
Hmm.
right? That those prayers have evolved. But here's my question: what do those prayers sound like? What do those evolved prayers sound like?
I think, generally speaking, I think it's going to sound more other focused and God focused.
Hmm.
Um,
They sound more mature,
More mature. Yeah.
not as selfish.
Right.
Yeah,
That it's not going to be I need this, I need this. It's probably there's going to be more thanksgiving given to God. There's going to be more interest in others. There's going to be more what would you like me to do
right,
than do
right,
this for me.
right.
Uh,
Well, I think you touched on that also with the cards that we did at the beginning of the year.
yeah.
Evolved prayer is not just asking God, I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things
Yes.
done. It's
Yep.
God, what do you need me to
Hmm.
do? What are you calling me to do? How are you stretching me? And so forth. I
Yep.
think that's an
And
excellent example of that.
and thank you for that, because you had that idea as you're reading through my
Yeah.
sermon. Like, hey, remember we did this at the
Yep.
beginning of the year.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was great.
Cool. Very
Good
good.
reminder for
Yeah.
us.
I loved this quote that you did. We'll move on here to number 2
Sure.
here, but I love the quote that you had. Don't treat God like Google where you're looking for quick answers.
Yeah.
I think that's it, when we do that is us showing our level of spiritual immaturity,
Hmm.
right? God, I need 1, 2,
Yeah.
3. I need you to answer these, right? And we don't understand. We don't learn from the no's. We don't
Yeah.
learn from the maybe. We don't learn from the slow down, right? We just want
Yeah.
our answers, our quick fix, and that's it.
And
So,
that's a temptation for all of us today. We live in such a um, quick answer, quick satisfaction culture. Just everything. I mean, we talked about this before, but just Instacart, and you could pick any movie that you want at any time, and
mhm.
I could just instant satisfaction
Sure.
and Google answers
Yeah.
for everything.
Yeah.
And so I think we've gotten lazy in putting in the hard work. I think we've also been impatient
Mm,
in getting
absolutely.
quality answers in the right timing. And so, yeah.
It was like the
So I'm preaching to myself too. That's
yeah.
hard. I want quick answers from God a lot of times, but
There was a pastor I heard as a kid that I heard him preach it in Spanish, but he said, one of the things I struggle with so much is patience. I'm so impatient. And so I pray, God, hurry up, give me patience. Like, I think it's so
yep,
funny. It's such a good example.
that
So,
is funny.
okay, let's move on to point number 2. Another way that we can get more yeses from God. This one was a good challenge specifically to us. It's a strong challenge. Say yes more often to others. That'll preach, man. That's,
Hmm.
say yes more often to others. So what happens though if we're not in a position to say yes?
Then you don't have to. I think
That's fair.
it's
Yeah.
say yes where you can. Now, I would challenge you before you make the excuses, really think on, can I really not? Is this an inconvenience, or am I
Mm,
really not
that's
able
a
to?
great point. Yeah.
Because we could easily be like, no, I mean, I'm busy. I'm busy all the time.
Hmm.
Can I really not rearrange something to
Right.
make that a yes?
Yeah.
Is that really completely impossible? And maybe it is maybe it is something that's so out of reach. Maybe it's something that's really impractical to say yes to. And that's fine. I understand we also cannot say yes to
Hmm.
everything.
Hmm.
There's too many needs out there. I can't give enough support to every charity that wants it, to every
Right.
homeless person that's
Right.
needing some assistance. I don't have the capacity.
Well,
Um,
and I think that speaks really well. I think you're painting a great picture of, well, it parallels with what Jesus says.
mhm,
Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? The
mhm,
point Jesus is making is you would be a wildly sinful and evil person if you did something like that.
mhm.
And to your point is it really a no? or am I just being evil and don't want to help?
Yeah.
Right. I think you're making a strong parallel there between the two. But you also said, say yes where you can,
Mm-hmm.
where it is good, and where it is a sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my challenge, and this one is a strong question on my behalf, because I think I would struggle with this a little bit. Does it have to be a sacrifice?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
But if it's not a sacrifice, then that's probably just an easy yes.
Mm-hmm.
I guess is
So
part
there's
of my
no
point in
reason
saying
you
that.
shouldn't be able to say
Yeah,
yes.
it's like
okay.
it brings me joy. If you ask me for help, you're a good friend of mine.
Mm.
So I find joy if you're like, hey, can you give me a ride today, or can you get me this? Would you? I forgot my wallet.
Yeah.
Would you buy me lunch?
Yeah.
Or like that is not a sacrifice for me
Okay.
because I care for you, and it's like, yes, here's a way that I could bless my brother, someone that I care about. That's really not a sacrifice for me, but that's a good yes. I'm hopefully like blessing you by doing that kind of thing as
Mhm.
well. But the reason I put the word sacrifice in there is so that we do pause and think about like this is a sacrifice, but maybe it's also a good thing to say yes. So I think that was my challenge in
Okay.
in saying it that
Yeah,
way.
that's fair. Now, how do we know? Because you're encouraging, obviously, us to say yes. How do we discern? How do we make that judgment call if what I'm saying yes to is a good thing or a
Mhm.
bad thing?
Part of that is do the best that you can to discern that and realize that sometimes we do something with um the right motives, but it how someone uses that,
Mhm.
that's not totally on us. As long as if we're doing things thoughtfully, um I would say generally if it's helpful to someone, is it blessing them in some way? Is it kind? Is it true?
Mhm.
Is it um is it going to make their day better? Is it going to point them closer to Christ? Uh, is it going to change something potentially for the better? I could give some money to a person in need, and they could go off and buy something foolish. They could buy something
Yeah.
destructive, alcohol or drugs or something. But and there's a time for wisdom in that. If
Yeah.
you know someone for sure is going to do that,
Mhm.
okay, me giving money is pretty stupid.
Mhm.
But if it's someone that, to the best of my knowledge, like I think of, there's people I've seen at shopping centers, there's a kid with them.
Yeah.
And I try to get them some help. And maybe the best thing is give them a meal or give them some other resources. But if I'm all I have time for, it's like they caught me in the moment. I'm right there, and I'm able to give some money. Maybe I will, and I pray that they'll do the best they can with it.
Yeah.
And so if it's so. If there's question about whether or not it's good, I would say pray about it, do a quick prayer. Like I would pray, Lord, I don't know, but to the best of my ability,
And pray that God says yes.
yeah, there you go. Yeah. Or says no very clearly. So I don't have to do this thing. Yeah. But yeah, do it
Okay.
prayerfully.
Yeah.
Once you've given something good, then it's up to that person to do the right thing with it. That's how it is with sharing the gospel.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
Absolutely.
It could fall on deaf ears, or it could change someone's life for the better. And so I'm going to lean towards it was worth sharing.
Almost it always good to err on the side of caution with
Yeah.
that, or generosity.
Yeah,
that
err
kind
on the
stuff.
side of
Yeah.
generosity.
Yeah,
What's
yeah,
it
yeah.
costing me?
Yeah.
Not
Cool.
a whole lot.
Finally, you said a way we can get more yeses from God is to live by the golden rule. Can you help us understand, for those who have never heard it? I mean, it's often used out in the world, but
Yeah,
it's actually, in fact, a biblical
it is a biblical principle.
biblical
Yep.
principle. So help us
Yeah,
understand, what
so
is
it's
the golden rule?
It's the kind of classic line: "Do unto others as you would like them to do unto
Yeah.
you."
Yeah.
And so treat others how you want to be treated, I guess, is another way to say it.
Mm-hmm. How does that help us get more yeses from God?
Part of my point is, I guess, kind of two pieces to that is, again, God blesses us. He says yes to us based on how we respond to others. So I brought up, I think, judging. So
Yes.
what we talked about last week,
Yeah.
Jesus says, in the same manner that you judge others, you too will be
Mhm.
judged. In the same
Mm-hmm.
measures that you use against someone, that will be measured to you.
Mm-hmm.
And also in the Lord's Prayer,
Right.
forgive us as we
As we
have forgiven those who have trespassed against
Right.
us. And so there's some kind of connection on how we treat people God
There's a
treats
corollary
us.
there. Yeah.
And I think we could see a lot of cases of that in Scripture of how God's people were treating others, and whether or not God would give them favor.
Mm.
Um, sinful behavior of certain kings in Israel and Judah
Yep.
when they were not being good people and treating others right, God would withhold some justice from them. And so treating people the right way is a way that we love God. Jesus asked us, he said, when I was in prison, you visited me. When I was hungry, you fed me. The disciples said, Lord, when did we do those things for you?
Right.
He said, when you did those for the least of these, when you did those things for other people,
Mm-hmm.
you did those for God. When we love people, that is an indirect way of us loving God.
Right.
And so he's going to bless that. The other piece of it was that just as a natural consequence, when I'm a kind person to others, it's often going to come back to benefit me. When I've gone out of my way to always be someone who's serving others, who shares a word of kindness, who affirms people, who gives generously to them. When I'm in my time of need, when I'm having a bad day, I have more friends lined up ready to encourage me. This was
That's
kind
good.
of a hard week
Yeah.
for us for various reasons, you and me, and some on our staff. And I like to think, hopefully I'm pouring into others on a regular basis, but some of my friends reached out and just asked, how are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And checked in on me. And
Yeah.
so I feel like it's just reciprocated that friendship. They came back to bless me.
Mm-hmm.
People that hopefully have felt me loving them as well.
Right.
That seem to have come
Right.
back to benefit me.
Well, and you followed that thought process throughout this entire point, because you mentioned how Jesus later in the same Gospel of Matthew makes the command, Matthew 22:37, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. But he goes on, and you hone in on the second element. It turns out that following Jesus, the second greatest commandment is to love our neighbor. Right. And that is going to bless us in return. That's ultimately what we come from that. So what you're challenged to us to do is to put others first, to live by the golden rule, treat others first as you want to be treated. It's not written, think about how you want to be treated and then treat others that way, right? It's very intentional about treat them the way you want to be treated, treat them with respect, with love, with kindness, and so forth. But here's a question that I think we often, or at least related to how we often misapply this verse. How do we distinguish putting others first versus turning myself into a doormat? How do we distinguish between those two?
Probably get some godly counsel to discern. It's really case by case. I don't think that we're ever called to just tolerate abuse. I would distance myself from people.
Yeah.
If they're toxic, if they're harmful, I would distance myself, but remain kind, pray for them, forgive them as I can, or forgive them always, I guess I should say. I don't know. Do you have thoughts there? Like how you might distinguish some of those things?
Yeah, I guess what I would do if I start to feel like a doormat is, am I the only one who's being approached by this person? If I've got a friend who says, Josue, I need you to do this for me, and I'm the only one they're coming to, and if I'm not seeing any effort on the other individual's part, to me that's the classic example of I've now become an enabler. I am now the doormat. I'm now the one picking up when your life falls apart because you keep making the poor decisions.
Yeah.
And at that point, I would feel I have the freedom, the permission to speak into that individual's life. Like, I think we need to reevaluate the things that you keep doing that bring you back to this position. And
that's actually the most loving. It's loving.
I totally agree. Yep.
Loving them.
Yep.
And I mean, you might even position it as I'm also protecting others.
Correct.
Because when this doormat is totally beaten and worn down, they're going to go do this to someone else.
Absolutely.
So I need to speak into this and call it out.
Well, and the thing is,
there's a loving way to do that.
To your point of protecting others, the first people who come to mind who I'm going to protect is my family. And imagine if I get beaten down to a pulp, if I become such a doormat to someone else. And I mean that in a not an abusive way, like physically abusive, but
Mhm.
it's just a if I'm taken advantage of so much, what's left of me for my family?
Yes.
What's left of me for my wife,
Yeah.
for my kids? What's left of me for my ministry?
Yeah.
What's left? There's
Yeah, because
nothing.
that it's taking away, I mean, in your position from the whole church.
Absolutely. Yes.
You're
And my
so
first assignment, though,
yeah.
is my family,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
if I can't serve them, how do I expect to serve the church
Mhm.
at all?
Mhm.
How am I going to?
So there's healthy boundaries that you put
Correct.
up there.
Yes. And I
And being okay to speak truth back to it. Call people
100%.
out if
Yeah.
it's toxic behavior, if it's inappropriate.
Yeah.
If
And,
it's
I mean, does that line up with what your heart was behind this of
yeah.
loving the person, but without becoming that doormat?
Yes. Yeah, there's a
Okay.
balance in all these
Yeah.
things, right? Saying yes to others where more often, but not to bad things, not to toxic things, not
Mhm.
to enabling bad behaviors
Mhm.
or abuse or anything of that sort.
Yeah. Well, and that's
And I would oh sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, as I was thinking about it more, especially after preaching, my main point I really want to emphasize is actively engage God.
Mhm.
The other two are almost kind of a sub point under
Yeah.
that.
Well, I
Like
think
a
that's why we
nuance.
spent the most amount of
Yeah,
time there too.
and I did. I
Mhm.
did probably spend almost the first half of
Yeah.
the sermon.
Well, even here, yeah, we
Yeah,
did.
engaging
Most of
God.
it was there, yeah.
Yeah, because that's where the wisdom
Yeah.
is.
If you can do that, these
Yeah,
will come.
engage God. And as you
Yes.
do so, then say yes to others because
Yeah.
part of that
Yeah.
is our calling to love others. But that's almost a branch off of it. Jesus says the first commandment is to love God with everything,
Mhm.
our hearts, our soul, our mind, our
Mhm.
strength. So that's first. Second is loving our neighbor as ourselves, and those
Mhm.
kind of tie those two, point 2 and 3 tie together there.
Yeah.
But prioritize, make sure that your love for God is not compromised by your investment in others.
Mhm.
So we got to get that right hierarchy.
Yeah. Well, and you kind of closed I loved this challenge. You closed out of how detrimental us becoming a doormat is to us.
Mhm.
That I'm going to find myself challenged with someone rude this week. And I love what you said when someone cuts you off in traffic, keep your hand and all your
Oh,
fingers
yeah.
down. I couldn't help but laugh
I
out loud
know.
when you said that.
I almost
just
said
cracked me up.
Josue.
Yeah, you
I know
would,
you didn't. I
would.
know, but I don't want people to think you
Yeah.
actually do that.
No,
You don't.
not at all. No, but I thought that was so funny because I'm just like, oh,
I
it's
know
the
you get mad
traffic
in
that
traffic.
gets me.
That's
I
why
do. I really am working. I've actually gotten better. I have developed a trick. I wouldn't even really call it a trick. As soon as I find myself getting, I had to do it this morning.
Mhm.
As soon as I find myself getting irritated, I'm coming down the road relatively quick or just at the pace that I'm coming. But it's that person who thinks, yeah, I can make it. And they try and cut you off.
Yeah.
What I do is I try and brake almost too hard, more than what I normally would. Like intentionally, like, oh, I want to make sure and give you space. I have to trick my mind into doing that.
Okay.
And I find myself less irritated because normally what I would do is just
your idea to let them in.
yes, kind of like I'm like I want to let you in
Yeah.
because otherwise what I would normally do is just coast right up behind you
Right.
and
Squeeze as close as
and then
possible.
then I feel bad after doing that.
Yeah.
But how did we end up talking about me driving here? This is
Yeah.
not good. Okay,
Confession time.
Yeah, but no, I really appreciated the charge for sure, and I really loved the final charge you gave us all as what that looks like is we want to see yeses when it comes to salvation.
Yes.
We want to pray for all of those people, and I guess I would just encourage the church today. Hey, I hope you guys have been praying. I hope you've made time this week to pray for one of those names. Don't forget, you can go to our website and see those names on there. Please pray for those. That's where we want to see yeses more than ever. We want to see that. So, any final words? Thank you for that. Just the incredible hope, because I know for a lot of people, we were at the hospital yesterday and someone asked you, where's the yes in this? You know,
I thought it would close out.
Yeah.
I'll just say it you'll hear a little more about this weekend, but we lost a friend yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
We were at the hospital right after they pulled the plugs,
Mm-hmm.
and so very, very sad. A man, young man, who left behind a wife and kids, and so one of the family members in the room, had heard my sermon the day before, said, "I'm not angry, but where is the yes in this?"
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard. I mean, we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know fully.
Yeah.
And I said, he said no to me this time too. I mean, we were praying
Yeah.
this for this gentleman and their family. We've been praying the last couple of weeks, and pretty heavily. We prayed with staff. I mean, lots of people lifting him up. We visited the hospital several times to see him and pray over him, asking God for mercy, asking for full restoration this side of heaven. And this time God said no. And so, but I go back to the yes, kind of as I was ending the sermon, just it's hard to understand this side of how could that be a good thing? And there's people ask these questions. How could a good God say no to that? Wasn't that obvious? People were praying right after they've heard about the shooting with Charlie Kirk. Some were immediately sent out prayers. We prayed for that the day that happened at our staff meeting. We prayed for Charlie. God took him home. And so why does God say no to some of these good things? So I do want to emphasize there is a way to get more yeses. And I stand behind what I preached on Sunday. I really believe when we actively engage God and do these other things, more yeses will come because we're aligned. We align ourselves with God's heart. But sometimes God still says no, and we don't always understand why. But in those moments, I just want to reemphasize, remember what God has said yes to. The most critical things, because our friend is in heaven, no doubt about it. And so I shared with the family, I said, I know for a fact God said yes to salvation for him, yes to eternal life for him, yes to his promised presence that he will remain with this family, with those who are mourning this life. God says yes to his presence. God says yes. I really believe in the promise of peace that surpasses all understanding. And so I hang on to those things, knowing God's character, knowing he's good, that is where we could, if we could get our minds there to remember that in the midst of the tension, still mourning, still sad. It's okay to be disappointed. It's okay even to be angry about the outcome with the limited knowledge that we have as humans. But balance that. And off balance it with the goodness that we know God has said yes to the most critical things. And we will be together in paradise, those who put their faith in Jesus. So we'll see our friend again.
I truly believe that your answer was inspired by the Holy Spirit, because we had just prayed and she asked that question, and
a lot of pressure.
It didn't even come to me that she was talking about the sermon, but it's like you caught on immediately to what she was asking you. And your answer, I think, also spoke, I think maybe, I don't even know if you're aware of this, but I think it speaks to a question that we all legitimately ask ourselves when someone we love dies. Am I ever going to see them again?
Yes.
Yeah. I think the answer
if we
was
both put our faith in Christ.
Yeah. And I think that was such a Holy Spirit inspired answer that you offered that family, that I was crying back there, because I was upset even through crying. But it was such a Holy Spirit inspired answer that she didn't flat out ask the question, but your answer addressed that yes to salvation, yes to the presence of Christ is with you, yes to these answers, but yes to the deepest question that even as faithful believers, we will still, that pain that we feel causes us to ask that question: am I ever going to see you again? Yes. Yeah. And that was such a wonderful.
And yes, God was with us in that moment to minister. I mean, you prayed a beautiful prayer over the family. That we're human. It's really, really hard when there's a family member, someone we loved. Even when we go and visit people we don't know very well, but it's like to see people suffering and to have wisdom in the moment, the grace to be able to minister. I mean, we lean on the Spirit heavily, and that was another moment God said yes to helping us to be able to give hopefully a little bit of hope to this family who's in a really tough spot right now. So sorry to end on a little bit sadder note, but just. But very practical, I think, as far as we face these things in life. God says yes, he says no, he says wait, he says grow. That's the fourth one, I guess. Yeah. And there's nuanced answers, but even in the no, I kind of started with this. It's a no, but God still has other things for us there. Wait, and he's at work. And so I kind of just want us to keep our hope there.
Yeah. Thanks again for making clear to us the hope that we have when it feels like there's no's, to see the yeses that are there, to see the yeses and how God is faithful. And we've seen it time and time again. Even in circumstances like yesterday, we have the hope that gives us that light in our hearts, that gives us that hope that yes, there is a yes, and amen. Back to the passage again.
Yeah,
and
1 Corinthians.
So thanks again for sharing
Absolutely.
that. That's awesome. Appreciate it. Guys, thanks for joining us today. We'll let you guys get on with your day. But hey, don't forget to like and subscribe. We're on YouTube. We are on Apple Podcasts. We are on Spotify. We're on the church app. You can find us pretty much anywhere on there. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget, you can email us if you've got questions. We've already gotten some of those, and we intend to address those pretty soon here, or we'll do our best to respond to those. But can you share with us the email?
Yeah, it's podcast@centerpointchurch.church.
Podcast@centerpointchurch.church. Thanks for joining us today, guys. Hope you guys are having a great week. We love you guys. We'll see you guys next time.
Love you. Tell your friends.